Honorable Chief Minister, President of LawAsia, Mrs. Melissa Pang, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, President of Bar Association of India, Mr. Prashant Kumar, Secretary General of LawAsia, Mr. Gordon Hughes, Mr. Shyam Diwan, distinguished members of the Executive Committee of LawAsia, members of LawAsia, and delegates from a large number of countries who have taken the trouble to come for this important conference, LawAsia. It's my duty to welcome all of you and say a few words about LawAsia before we request the honorable guests to light a ceremonial lamp for inauguration of what I would call as a Jnana Yajna, which is a sacrificial learning that is going to take place in the next few days. LawAsia is an association of lawyers and bar associations from all over Asia and the Asia Pacific. The annual conference is organized by LawAsia, intellectually stimulating, informative, and a great social occasion for lawyers across continents to meet, greet, and learn. The 36th LawAsia Conference is being hosted by the Bar Association of India in the tech capital of India, which is Bangalore. The city is famous for numerous gardens, friendly people, well-known pubs, cosmopolitan population. A recent addition to these is a horrendous road traffic, which you will no doubt experience in the next 4 days if you have not already had a taste of it. The state of Karnataka, formerly called Mysore, after the famous monarchs who ruled the city of Mysore, boasts of wildlife, rivers, advanced educational institutions, software industries, excellent hotels. Everywhere, all at once, lawyering in the digital age. All of us have experienced this in our professional lives. The conference promises to bring to the fore in the next few days several erudite and accomplished lawyers and judges with sessions on diverse array of topics from human rights, environmental law, information technology, alternate dispute resolution, criminal law, gender balancing. The conference organizing committee, headed by my colleague and dear friend Mr. Shyam Diwan and me, which were ably assisted by a band of young, enthusiastic and untiring professional junior colleagues, along with able guidance from Mr. Prashant Kumar, the President of Bar Association of India. It has led to an interesting agenda spread over 2 days, which promises to be a great feast for lawyers. Our target was to achieve 500 registrations for this conference, and I'm happy to announce that we have crossed that number today. We have over 200 delegates from overseas and neighboring countries. As they say, all work and no play is no good for lawyers. Therefore, we have a couple of special addresses. The icing on the cake is the keynote address to be delivered by the Chief Justice of India, Dr. Dhananjay Chandrachud, tomorrow. Parallelly, there is an international moot court that is going to be held, which has already commenced this morning, the finals of which is to be judged by a former Chief Justice of India, Justice Rajendra Babu. The Chief Minister of the State of Karnataka, Honorable Shri Siddaramaiah, graciously agreed to participate and inaugurate the conference at this session. We are deeply indebted to you, sir, for this. Elaborate arrangements have been made for lunches, dinners, tea, coffee interesting array of entertainment options which showcase the culture of Karnataka, particularly the two recitals that you are going to see of Bharatanatyam. I warmly welcome the Honorable Chief Minister, Honorable Judges past and present who are present, the delegates, invitees and media persons, and wish you happy times during the conference. Before I go to the next important part of writing the traditional lamp, I will take a few minutes time to explain to you the significance of lighting this lamp. There are two prayers that we traditionally offer in India. One is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is a part of the Vedic lore of this country. And it reads like this: Om Asato Ma Satgamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Mritangamaya. Which means that when you light a lamp, you're praying that let there be light, and let the light remove darkness, and lead me from something which is unreal to the real, and give me immortality. That is one prayer. That is significance of lighting a lamp. There's one more interesting composition by a famous Indian philosopher and guru who is Bhagavan Adishankaracharya. There's a small shloka that he has composed. It's just one verse. And I'll read it in part because I don't want to take more time reading Sanskrit version. I'll give you a gist of what it means. It starts like this: Kim jyotistava bhanumana hanime ratro pradeepadikam syadevam ravideepadarshana vidho kim jyotirakhyahime. And it goes on. It's a conversation between a guru and his shishya. And the conversation reads like this. The guru asks the shishya as to what is it that provides light. And the student answers in a very mundane fashion and says that by day, sun gives us the light, and by night, it is the lamp which gives us light. Then the guru proceeds and asks him, what is the light that sees these lights? The student answers, it is the eye that sees it. Probing further, the guru asks, what is the light that illumines the eye? And the student replies that it is the intellect. Finally, the guru poses a difficult question as to what is it that knows the intellect. The illuminated shishya or student responds that it is the I or the ego. And the guru therefore concludes that you, the individual human being, is the light of lights, and the shishya responds, truly I am the divine spirit. So the spirit that we all appreciate in India is the one of unity. There should be no distinction of any kind. And it is symbolic of that we light a lamp when any auspicious occasion arises in our homes or in any public function. Before I invite the honored guests here to come and light the lamp, I would be failing in my duty if I don't mention a great deal of support that we have received from several sponsors. The platinum sponsors were Embassy, Divyashri Developers, were gold, Zolvit, another gold sponsor. Mr. Anand Singh and Mr. Siddharth Singh were also another gold sponsors. We had a moot court sponsor, which is the Ramaya College of Law. We have a silver sponsor, was Just Law, and two more silver sponsors were there. That is the Hong Kong Bar Association was very generous in participating in this sponsorship. The gala dinner is sponsored by Ritz-Carlton Hotel and Nitesh Group of Companies. And we have a number of session sponsors. We have sponsors for the event and for the lanyards, which is tri-legal. And we are going to announce the session sponsors as the sessions take place. With these words, I have great pleasure in welcome all of you, and then invite the honored guests to light the lamp. But before I do that, I would be very happy to read a message that we received for this conference from the Honorable Vice President of India and from the Honorable Prime Minister. The Honorable Vice President says, I am pleased to learn that this conference is featuring delegates and speakers from over 35 jurisdictions who have delved into diverse aspects. Particularly noteworthy are discussions on contemporaneous issues like chat GPT, social media, content, etc. I wish the 36th annual conference every success. May it stand as a testament to Bharat's legal powers, spinal strength, ethos,
and may the deliberations underscore our commitment to a legal landscape firmly rooted in justice and equity. The Prime Minister also has sent us a message, and it reads like this: judicial systems play an important role in creating a society that is fair, just, equitable. Access to justice is the lifeline of a just and fair society. It is therefore imperative for every nation to prioritize the ease of justice for its citizens, ensuring that justice is accessible to all. I am positive that this gathering of legal experts will result in an exchange of thoughts on diverse aspects of including business law, environment law, employment law, etc. May the discussions at the conference be path-breaking and result-oriented. Best wishes for its all-round success. Signed, Shri Narendra Modi. With these words, I now request all the honored guests on the podium, and also I request Mr. Shyam Diwan to please come over and help us to light the lamp of this conference.
शत्रुबुद्धि विनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते दीपज्योतिः परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपज्योतिः परब्रह्म दीपज्योतिर्जनार्दनः दीपो हरतु मे पापम् सन्ध्यादीपनमोस्तुते ओ दीपब्रह्मरूपस्त्वं ज्योतिषां प्रभुरव्ययः ओ दीपब्रह्मरूपस्त्वं ज्योतिषां प्रभुरव्ययः आरोग्यं देहि पुत्रांश्च मतिं स्वच्छां हि मे सदा रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् यस्य तिष्ठे गृहे दीपः तस्य नास्ति दरिद्रता शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धि विनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं पुरव्ययः आरोग्यं देहि पुत्रांश्च मतिं स्वच्छां हि मे सदा रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् रवेरस्तं समारभ्य यावत् सूर्योदयो भवेत् यस्य तिष्ठे गृहे दीपः तस्य नास्ति दरिद्रता शुभं कुरु त्वं कल्याणम्
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gordon Hughes. I'm the Secretary General of LawAsia. Thank you, Naganan, for your... where have you gone? Anyway, thank you, Naganan, for your opening remarks. And in case I don't get a chance to say this again publicly, thanks to you and your conference co-chair, Shyam Diwan, for the magnificent work you've put into arranging this event. I know you've both worked absolutely tirelessly for about 6 months on on making these arrangements and ensuring what I know will be a very successful conference. Now, for many of you, this will no doubt be your first involvement with LawAsia. So let me just tell you something about it. You may or may not be aware that LawAsia was founded in 1966, and its council represents 33 of the peak legal representative organisations from across the Asia-Pacific region. LawAsia is primarily an organisation which promotes and expresses the concerns and the aspirations of lawyers across the Asia-Pacific in relation to matters involving human rights and the rule of law. At the same time, through its sections and committees, it has cutting-edge international expertise in matters of substantive law. Naganan mentioned some of them. ADR, banking and finance, energy and resources, environmental law, family law, taxation, intellectual property, technology, and that's just naming a few of them. This annual conference is the most significant event in our calendar. It's when we all gather in person, something increasingly rare in the post-COVID era. It's also when Council is able to debate current issues of importance. Sections and committees are able to meet and set their agendas for the forthcoming year. Bilateral side meetings take place between law associations, and lawyers generally are able to meet both professionally and socially. This is the third annual conference held in India since LawAsia was founded. Previous annual conferences were held in New Delhi in 1985 and again in 2010. 4 of our presidents over that period have come from India. Mr. Fali Nariman in 1985 to 87, Mr. Anil Devan in 1991 to 93, Mr. G.L. Sanghi 2003 to 05, and Mr. Prashant Kumar in 2015 to 17. Our President-elect, who will assume the presidency at the conclusion of this conference, is Mr. Shyam Devan, son of former President Mr. Anil Devan. So to be fair to say that LawAsia enjoys a especially close relationship with India and the Indian legal profession, and that the Bar Association of India in particular has contributed greatly to the evolution and growth of LawAsia over the years. This promises to be another excellent conference. I don't believe we've ever had one which wasn't excellent, and I trust you will all find the experience rewarding. Now, I do hope, if I can be mercenary for just a moment, that you'll all find the experience sufficiently rewarding that you'll each join LawAsia as an individual member in the course of the conference if you're not a member already. As I said at yesterday's seminar, membership is the lifeblood of LawAsia, and we are always seeking to increase our numbers. That's all I want to say by way of introduction. I'd now like to introduce our president, Melissa Pang. Melissa is a former president of the Law Society of Hong Kong and has worked tirelessly over the past 2 years to help re-establish LawAsia after the privations we experienced as an organisation during the COVID years when we were unable to meet in person. Melissa.
Good afternoon. Sri Siddharam Maya, Chief Minister, Karnataka, Dr. Sumaya Swaminathan, Chairman of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, and Mr. Prashant Kumar, President of the Bar Association of India, esteemed guests and fellow participants. I only arrived in Bengaluru just yesterday, and I found it to be such a wonderful city. And the first thing I learned is like whenever I see people, I should send everyone with a greeting, with a warm namaskara. I hope I get it right. As president of LawAsia, I'm very delighted to be here and to extend a very warm welcome to all of you attending the 36th LawAsia Annual Conference. And today, we heard there's like over 500 participants and like over 200 are from overseas. And I thank all the participants who came all the way to India. I found Bengaluru to be such a vibrant and culturally rich city. It holds a special place because when we look at it, economically and culturally, the significance is huge. Bengaluru is the perfect setting for this year's conference. We are talking about everything, everywhere, all at once, lawyering in the digital age. And Bengaluru, in fact, is the Indian Silicon Valley. I can see the city boasts a thrilling technology hub, and it attracts significant foreign investment. I heard, and I can see, and I feel the weather is very nice here. And also, the technological opportunities is a lot. Also, I heard that in this state, it's attracting a lot of foreign investment. And I think the city is booming. And I think we have made a right choice to be here. And as mentioned by Gordon, I mean, LawAsia is indeed a regional legal organization. We are built upon our core values. We are built upon the core values of access to justice, rule of law, human rights, of which lawyers in the whole world are embracing. Although we come from different culture, different race, different background, it is a common value, common core value we are sharing. And today's conference is surely it will be an unforgettable event. We can see lots of gathering, tea gathering, reception, cocktails, and gala dinner, which I really look forward to. And a lot of topics we'll cover. But for the overseas delegates, I think they will have a special interest because I know that's a special session that will be delegated to discussion about the pending liberalization of India's foreign lawyer admission rules. I mean, that sounds really interesting. And I think many of us will be keen to know more. Opening of the legal market is a very huge issue. I think there will be a forum for analysis and exploration of opportunities for both international participants and local participants. Furthermore, I'm very pleased to announce that during our annual council meeting, Justice Preston, one of LawAsia's longest-serving and effective committee chairs and thought leaders, as well as Mr. Professor Yasushi Higashizawa. A bit difficult it's a Japanese name. Professor Yasushi Higashizawa. He is a very important person in LawAsia. He took up the important role of co-chairing LawAsia's Human Rights Committee for many, many years. They were awarded honorary life members of LawAsia in recognition of their outstanding contributions and leadership. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. And also our Secretary General will award the Life Honorary Membership later on this evening. Also, I would like to express my appreciation in advance to our keynote speaker, as well as our distinguished plenary speaker. And I trust their insight will undoubtedly provide us with valuable food for thought as we continue our journey in upholding the rule of law. Together, we are stronger, and we can stand united in facing many challenges in life. And we also advocate for the protection of established legal principles that are currently under threat. On this note, I would wish you a very productive and enjoyable conference. Thank you for your attention, and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I'd now like to invite my good friend Prashant Kumar, President of the Bar Association of India and former LawAsia President, to give some words of welcome.
Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Siddharamaiah, who is not merely a Chief Minister and a Chief Guest, but one of our own. He is a lawyer by training, so a special welcome for him. And our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Swaminathan, the person who stood by and worked for as Chief Scientific Advisor in World Health Organization during the most critical period for humankind in recent history, that is the COVID pandemic. And President Melissa Peng, Secretary General Gordon, who is also past President of LawAsia, he has chosen to shoulder this burden of running LawAsia as a very, very gracious, gesture to LawAsia and the legal community of Asia Pacific. And last but not least, my colleague Shyam Diwan, who will be taking over as President of LawAsia at the conclusion of this conference, and also Mr. S.S. Naganan, who has been elected as Vice President of LawAsia. So it's a proud moment for the Indian legal profession, for the Bar Association of India and India itself, that we are having this 36th LawAsia conference here, and we have such happy developments to announce. Now, friends, Mr. Naganan, in his opening remarks, spoke about the significance of lighting of lamp and the significance of intellect and knowledge. You know, rule of law is also a core, in the modern society, a core element of all the good things, the intellectual, the human freedoms and all. And like the light of knowledge is to be protected, the rule of law is to be protected. You must have witnessed we were holding the candle and trying that it does not, it continues to shine so that we can light the lamp. The same is about law, rule of law. We have to protect it. We have to protect it because it's very delicate. It is the institutions we sustain it. And sometimes in our, cozy comfort of our daily lives and our professional practice, we go into that comfort zone and don't care about or invest ourselves in significant measure in the larger issues. So for the comfort of the air conditioning, the light is no longer there. So the same goes for the rule of law. And it's challenging times we are living in. We have conflicts going on, which is something new, that it is happening in the developed part of the world in 21st century, where we thought that all these issues have settled. and they are not going to be these kind of incidents which are war or something equivalent to war taking place. But if we look behind those, we find that it is the process of institutions getting weakened, the rule of law getting weakened, same like COVID, that those who had the weakened immunity, they suffered most. So in Israel, there was an attempt by the regime to dilute the powers of judiciary. The Israeli civil society and the lawyers community was protesting and struggling against it. So the whole attention of the nation state was in the inwards, fighting for the rule of law. And at that stage, the things occur, how to handle them and all becomes much more challenging. So that's why while we talk and we discuss all the topics which are part of the conference program under the theme of everything, everywhere, all at once, we must look at participating in organizations like Bar Association of India, organizations like LawAsia, where not only we participate in the conferences, we get the opportunity to invest ourselves in the larger issues, to invest ourselves in the challenging which continue to pose. You know, rule of law is something, democracy is something. We have to continuously engage to see that the public opinion is there to protect it. The other impulses in body politics do not take over. So the value of independent institutions is something which we have to come together to protect. And that's why we need to engage more intensively as members of the Bar Association, as members of organizations as LawAsia. So apart from the good news that we have two of our vice presidents getting high positions in LawAsia, this conference holds a significance for Indian legal profession, that we are signing memorandum of understanding with 7 bar associations across Asia Pacific during the course of next 3 days. So that is the Korean Bar Association, Malaysian Bar, Taiwan Bar Association, Law Council of Australia, Nepal Bar Association, Bar Association of Sri Lanka. This adds to a number of MOUs Bar Association of India already has across the globe. And let me also acknowledge the presence of all my vice presidents, the executive committee and office bearers of LawAsia, General Secretary of International Bar Association, and many legal luminaries, and my colleagues at the Indian Bar, my colleagues at LawAsia, and all the distinguished guests. Let us have very fruitful discussion, not only during the conference, but on the sidelines, and try to enjoy this wonderful city of Bengaluru despite traffic jams. Let us keep our minds and ears open to various sights and sounds and cultural activities which go around here. It's a wonderful city. It has a weather which is not there in India, in any other city throughout the year. So that's why it's a pleasure that we could hold this conference here. So I welcome you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prashant. It's now my pleasure and an absolute privilege to introduce the speaker to deliver the plenary address this afternoon. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan is the chairperson of MS Swaminathan Research Foundation and former chief scientist at the World Health Organization, as Naganan mentioned in his opening remarks. Like all of you, I'm greatly looking forward to hearing what she has to say.
Namaskaram. Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Siddaramaiah ji, senior dignitaries on the dais from the LawAsia leadership, as well as all the legal luminaries here in the audience. I feel like a fish out of water, being probably the only non-legal person in the room, but perhaps that's an advantage as well. So what I wanted to do today was to speak a little bit about the defining challenge of our time, and it's not the pandemic, which hopefully we are coming out of. Of course, we always have to be prepared for another pandemic at any time, but it's linked with the defining challenge, and that is climate change. And there's a link between the two, as we shall see, but also between our health and the health of all living organisms that live on this planet with climate change. And I also want to make the link with equity, because I'm speaking to an audience of lawyers, and you know everything about justice. But unfortunately, we live in a world where there's a lot of injustice, and there's climate injustice that we need to deal with, there's health injustice, and hopefully together we can think about some solutions and make a difference. I was speaking to some of you just before this function and asking whether you've started seeing cases in courts that deal with the impacts of climate change on people. And certainly globally now, there are many cases, and there's one particular one that stands out, which happened when I was in the WHO. And it was the mother of a young girl who died of asthma in London. And she had gone to court, basically, ascribing the death of her daughter, young daughter, to the air quality in London as being the reason for that child to have developed a severe asthmatic attack and then having died. And she won the case, and it led to a lot of action. And I think London is one of those cities globally now where the mayor himself, really plays a big leadership role in improving the air quality. Similarly, I'm sure that we're going to see, there is in the international level, of course, with the COP28 coming up in Dubai very soon, a lot of debate about climate justice and between the differentiated responsibilities of those who have historically the countries that have been responsible for emitting much more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and the impact that is being felt by countries and by populations that have not been historically so responsible. And in fact, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, I don't know how many of you have heard her speak, she's one of the most articulate leaders that I've heard, talks about it being existential crisis, not for tomorrow, but for today, for people who live in small island developing states. I remember the cabinet of the Maldives many years ago had a cabinet meeting underwater. And this was to basically highlight to the world that their country is at risk of disappearing and just going under the sea because of sea level rise. And so for many people around the world, it's not something that is about polar bears in the Arctic. It's about their own survival of their homes, their lives, and their livelihoods. Now, climate change is already affecting all aspects of our lives. And some of the effects I think we can relate to because they are direct effects, like heat, for example. And many of us who live in Asia know what it's like to experience prolonged heat waves. Similarly, it also worsens air pollution, and we'll speak a little bit about how the same drivers that are driving climate change, the fossil fuel use, for example, is also contributing to air pollution. It's also reducing our access to clean water. It's causing the warming of the seas and sea level rise, threatening not only people who live along the coast, but also the fish and other animals that live in the sea. We know that we are losing species, are getting extinct at the fastest rate ever in human history, and this is all what is called anthropogenic and we've now been living in the anthropogenic era for about 80 or 90 years, and essentially it's the era in which human beings are playing a dominant role in shaping the course of the planet. Health inequities and climate change are also deeply connected, and essentially climate change acts as a threat multiplier. So it worsens existing inequities, and in fact the pandemic did exactly the same thing. And we saw how the pandemic affected everyone around the world, but the poor and poor countries were definitely worse affected than those who had the resources to deal with it. So climate change exacerbates poverty, environmental degradation, as well as political instability. And a lot of the conflicts that we're seeing today, you can actually trace the roots back to climate impacts, to water shortages, and to what are, will increasingly be climate migrants who can no longer earn a living in their own place and will have to move to other places. And of course, nobody wants, large movement across national borders. So this is going to be a problem for everyone in the future. Like health inequities, climate change is a problem that's rooted in the structures, systems, and values of our society and economy. And therefore, eliminating health inequities and resolving climate change requires an intersectoral as well as a transformational approach. We can no longer afford to make very small changes or say we'll do some incremental things and hope that things will change. They cannot and will not. But on the positive side, many things that we do can have very positive effects, both for the climate as well as for our health. And in fact, in many cases, they are the same strategies. So climate change, I want to make the case that it is a public health emergency. And the health and well-being and possibly the very survival of many of the communities around the world are in danger, as I just said. And we've all experienced disastrous wildfires, extreme weather events, flooding, heat, etc. And also we have to think about the next generation, and the young people of today. What kind of world are they going to inherit? In fact, this whole term of eco-anxiety is something that has become very widespread. And surveys of mental health, especially around the world, have shown that in the 18 to 25 years age group, which used to be the most optimistic age group, previously, they are actually now today the most pessimistic age group, and it's the over 80s who seem to be the happiest. So that is a worrying state of affairs when our young people around the world are in a state of anxiety, depression, and huge uncertainty about the future. Now, what are some of the common elements or connections between climate change, health, and equity? The first thing is that the root causes or drivers of all of these are often the same. And what are they? It's our energy. Where does our energy come from? It is around transportation. It's around land use, housing, planning, food and agriculture, and socioeconomic systems. These are all key contributors to pollution and climate change, but they're also key shapers of how and where we live. And so the second is that the health risks and impacts of climate change are not equally or fairly distributed across people, and we mentioned that. And so pre-existing health status and living conditions are very important. So if you're already, and the same was true for COVID, right? We saw that if you had a pre-existing condition, or if you lived in overcrowded housing, and you were already socioeconomically deprived, then in every country in the world, those were the people who were impacted both by high mortality and high morbidity. So it exacerbates. Similarly, climate change exacerbates the existing social inequities because your health will further worsen if you're exposed to, high air pollution or repeated flooding, etc. But again, on the positive side, interventions that act on upstream drivers, they share systemic causes, they can most effectively address both. So if we deal with fossil fuel and cut down those emissions, you're going to reduce air pollution, improve people's health, as well as produce less carbon. and that's going to impact climate change. Similarly, if we address, let's say, transportation systems, we improve public transport, we make cycle lanes for people, we make a pedestrian, make it easy, we have green spaces in cities. All of these is going to contribute to reducing the heat, reducing emission, and improving health, because we know that diet and physical activity are the two key drivers of health today. And building political and economic power and voice are essential components both for climate resilience as well as for health. And we know that power imbalances, they allow the perpetuation of unhealthy living conditions. There are some places, Singapore is an example, where there's a very deliberate effort made to have housing, for example, mixed housing, so that you don't have areas where the rich live and areas where the poor live. That in turn actually helps to have better public services, because then there's a demand for that. Similarly, access to clean water, this is a fundamental human right, and yet we have 50% of health facilities around the world do not have drinking water and sanitation. 50% of health facilities around the world do not have electricity. And you can imagine what that means, particularly for women. So there's also a gender angle here, because if a woman comes in to have a delivery and there's no drinking, there's no electricity, let's say it's night, there is no running water or sanitation facilities, then the quality of the care delivered obviously will leave much to be desired. And similarly, we saw during the pandemic, the lack of oxygen became a huge issue. Now, oxygen was always needed to treat the sick, and people have always died because of a lack of oxygen. When you have a severe pneumonia, whether you're a young child or you're an older person, you need oxygen during those critical days. But it was one of those things that was a blind spot till the pandemic sort of brought it out, and everybody could see that oxygen was a life-saving drug that was still not available to many people. And at that time, of course, whether you were rich or poor didn't matter. If it was not available, it was not available. Similarly, our food systems, our land use, gradually we've been cutting down forests, reducing biodiversity. The number of plant species going extinct has also increased. There was a lot of biodiversity in edible plants around the world, particularly our indigenous communities. They know exactly what are all the different species in the forest that you can use as food. But over a period of time, I think through the commercialization of agriculture, we have, on the one hand, improved food production, food yields. There's more food security now than there was 50 years ago. But on the other hand, today 70% of the staples, are just 3 crops: rice, wheat, and maize. And the wide variety of nutritious crops that we used to have, that our ancestors used to eat, have been dying out. And this year, being the International Year of Millets, there's a lot of attention on the nutritional properties, but also millets are called climate-smart cereals because they need little water, they are climate resilient, they can grow even in semi-arid conditions. So they are very good for the environment and for our health. And yet, if you look at area under cultivation of millets, this has gone down year after year after year, again because of the policies. And in fact, the Karnataka government should be congratulated, because one of the states which has promoted the growing of millets, as well as the introduction of ragi, which is one of the commonly taken millets, through the public distribution system. So this is the kind of policy we need to improve, to have an impact both on health and environment. So we have to think of win-win solutions which will have good impacts both on our health and on planetary health. So we've got to look at adaptation as we face these challenges. Of course, there are national adaptation plans that are drawn up now. The global COP actually, they insist that every country should put out a plan both for what their carbon contributions are going to be and emissions, but also for how they're going to adapt to climate change. And more health is becoming a part of these adaptation plans. But unfortunately, these health plans are still not fully operationalized. And they're also not always rooted in the reality. So they have to be contextual. They have to be developed with community participation and engagement. They have to be practical and pragmatic. They need to address the issues. Again, it's an equity issue here. For people who can afford air conditioning, the heat is not such a big problem because you can still survive. For people who can afford to have air purifiers, even pollution, of course, pollution affects everybody, but you can protect yourself to some extent. But for people who live on the streets or who have jobs that involve manual labor, for example, construction labor, they have no choice but to go out and work, even whether it's hot or cold. And so again, we need to think about protecting those who have the least ability to protect themselves because of the circumstances in which they live. And I would like to make a special mention of the need for gender considerations in any policy that's drawn up. And as a senior woman who served in government and who served in the international level, it is still the fact that leadership positions are usually occupied by men, whether it's in health or whether it's in politics. And therefore, very often, policies are still gender blind. And so we need to make sure that, we not only are inclusive when we formulate policies, but also the power of women and the power of women's collectives that we've seen can change many. And I'm so delighted to see a very good gender balance here in this audience today. Now, it is in Paris in 2015, it was a defining moment because the Paris Agreement, for the first time, there was a legal sort of a binding on countries to sign up for commitments to both reduce their CO2 emissions as well as, start putting a plan for adaptation. And of course, there are still a lot of discussion and debate on who should be paying more, etc., and how exactly the loss and damage fund and the other kinds of funds should be created in order to make sure that, some of the historical imbalances could be set right, perhaps. But we're not on track. We're certainly not on track to achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius sort of upper limit that was needed to prevent catastrophic. And so we're on a path, hopefully not to get to 3 degrees rise, but to limit ourselves to somewhere around 2. And the commitments that countries have made today, up to date, are not enough to keep us at comfortable levels. And therefore, there's a very rapidly closing window of opportunity here. Now, for the first time this year, the COP in Dubai will have a whole day dedicated to health. A lot of health people and the WHO and others have been really insisting on this for many, many years. So finally, this year, there will be a health day where there will be more attention focused on the issues between, climate and health. What are the pathways? What are the health arguments for climate action? What are the barriers, best practices, etc.? And also taking action at the nexus of health, relief, recovery, and peace. There are other many documents and stock takes that are published. There's one that's published by the medical journal Lancet every year. It's called the Climate Countdown. They look at a number of indicators around the world to see what is happening in terms of health with respect to climate change. Now, their 2023 report just came out about a week ago, and again, the news is not very good in terms of what is happening in as far as the health indicators. And they track, how many people are dying due to heat. Now, heat again impacts the over 65s as well as the young children and pregnant women a lot. So there are a lot of projections about, how many heat-related deaths are going to increase, how much vector-borne diseases, dengue, for example. The dengue vector, Aedes aegypti, is spreading. It's now being able to live in elevations where there was no dengue before. Mosquitoes are able to survive. So malaria, dengue, diseases like that. Waterborne diseases, as you know, the cholera epidemics, 2022 was the year with maximum cholera outbreaks around the world, again, partly because cholera, the Vibrio cholera organism is also able to grow and thrive in coastal areas. as there is warming of the waters. And also, very importantly, there's huge economic costs. We've seen many countries, Pakistan, of course, India, we've had flooding, we've had fires, we've had typhoons and hurricanes. All of these have huge economic costs. And again, during the pandemic, there were calculations, that the global GDP had taken a hit of about 3 or 4%. Now, this is all trillions of dollars. Similar things are going to happen with climate. And just in 1 year alone, extreme weather events caused about $300 billion worth of losses globally and over 500 billion hours of labor lost. So productivity and labor loss is also going to be something that's going to impact the economies around the world. And on the research side, there's less data and evidence coming out of low and middle income countries than there is in high income countries. And we need much more because obviously the impacts could be similar, but the response and how people are managing them are very different. I did mention that it's not all bad news, so we don't all, we shouldn't get too depressed. There is some good news, and it's mainly on the renewable energy front. And so 2022, for example, global clean energy investment grew 15%, exceeding for the first time global fossil fuel investment by 61%. However, if you look at the top 20 big fossil fuel companies, they are not doing enough. So they are not shifting away from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Lending to the green energy sector rose. Deaths attributable to air pollution reduced in some countries, and mainly it was because of reduced coal-derived pollution. And the renewable energy sector grew to a historical high of 12.7 million employees globally in 2021. So again, renewable energy accounted for 90% of the growth in global electricity capacity in 2022. So that's very good. Renewable, mainly solar and wind, is gradually increasing, but if you look at the overall, it's still about 10% of the overall energy generation around the world. So even though in 21 and 22 we've seen a big uptick, this needs to really accelerate a lot, and that is where I think governments can do a lot. I wanted to say a little bit about the pandemic, because I see a lot of similarities between the two, particularly around global governance and legal frameworks, So what happened during the pandemic? We saw that even though there were international rules like the international health regulations, countries were not necessarily following those rules. They're supposed to be legally binding. They talk about things like, as soon you have to inform as soon as you detect, and there's a list of diseases which you have to inform the WHO about, and certainly if there's a new virus or a new undiagnosed syndrome, you're supposed to report. Similarly, there are rules around trade and travel restrictions and all of that, which were all ignored. And every country decided that, they need to do things that is best for their own populations. Now, perhaps that is natural or to be expected, but it certainly doesn't help to control something like a pandemic, which is a global event. And so while every country has to take care of their own populations, unless they also come together and agree on what actions to be taken collectively, there will always be people left out. So a good example are the inequities we saw with access to health products, whether it was oxygen, whether it was masks, whether it was other types of personal protective equipment, and of course, vaccines. Vaccines were available by the end of 2020. So of course, that itself was a scientific miracle that in 11 months, scientists were able to develop vaccines. And again, there's a reason why that was possible. There was over $100 billion invested around the world just on vaccines alone. There were more than 300 vaccine development efforts because we were tracking all of that at the WHO and providing the benchmarks and standards for what a safe and effective vaccine would look like. Countries did everything they could to accelerate clinical trials, and regulatory agencies around the world came together to fast track and decide beforehand on what the benchmarks, regulatory benchmarks would be, so that you don't delay. So everything was done, and it all was like a symphony orchestra, and that was the only reason it was possible to develop safe and effective vaccines in 11 months. So the global community showed that it's possible. What you can achieve if everyone comes together, and we have the scientific know-how today in the world to do this, to solve the problems that face the world today. We need the political will. That is what is needed to get people to actually come together, to break down those barriers that exist, and to have a common mission towards which, everybody works. Now, all that happened. The science and the scientists did their best, and they performed, and they could come up not only with vaccines, but also drugs. Of course, that took a little longer. Many clinical trials were done. Many drugs were found to be ineffective. Finally, some antivirals were developed. But also, we understood so much about the virus and how it transmits. I mean, that kind of knowledge about one virus, influenza has been with us ever since we know. But we really don't know as much about the influenza virus as we know about SARS-CoV-2 and the coronaviruses. And we know now that, this kind of zoonotic jump from animals to humans can happen. It has happened in the past. It's happening more frequently in the last 50 years. And so it's a matter of when, not if, we have the next pandemic. So, we have to be prepared. And again, the scientific, on the science side, it's possible, to overcome some of these challenges. But what was difficult was the politics and the lack of consensus, which led to the fact that while populations in high-income countries got vaccines freely, starting from December of 2020, and by the end of 2021, most high-income countries, 70% of their populations had received at least one vaccine, whereas less than 4% of people in low-income countries had received a single vaccine at the end of 2021. That was a stark difference that we were faced with, including healthcare workers and elderly people who we know were more, vulnerable to the bad effects of the virus. And so despite all the efforts of WHO setting up mechanisms like COVAX, which was meant to pool vaccines and distribute them equitably around the world, we could not do that because we could not source the vaccines. The vaccines were being hoarded in the countries that had the manufacturing capacity. And of course, then large countries like India and China and others, they had their own populations to vaccinate. And then on the whole of the African continent, we found there was not a single vaccine manufacturer. And so the entire continent was dependent on either donations or imports of vaccines. And many countries in Africa ended up paying very, very high prices and still not getting the vaccines on time. So I think this really taught us the lesson. And the lesson was that you need even science, R&D, manufacturing, all of this also needs to be distributed around the world. You cannot have the technologies concentrated in one part of the world and expect that everybody will receive the benefits. And this is why a few of us got so frustrated that we set up what's called the mRNA Technology Transfer Program. As you all know, mRNA was something that's been under development for 30 or 40 years. Catalin Carrico and Drew Weissman got the Nobel Prize this year, Nobel Prize for Medicine. They started working on it in the early 90s and persisted, even though there was no real indication, But during COVID, all of that 30 years of research paid off, and the mRNA vaccines, were developed very quickly, and they were very highly efficacious and also very safe. So this mRNA technology, unfortunately, was in the hands of two big companies, multinationals, despite the fact that the technology was developed at an academic university, but it was not available for public use. And therefore, the governments of India and South Africa went to the World Trade Organization and said, during the pandemic, all technologies that are developed should not be patented, but should be made available for public benefit. But this never went through. So the World Trade Organization did not agree to this till very, very late in 2022, and that too in a very limited form. And therefore, it's unfortunate that even during the pandemic, the intellectual property was used by some companies to make profits, huge profits, unimaginable profits, while there were people in many countries that, were dying. So this is why the mRNA Tech Transfer Program is one of those where we believe that democratization of knowledge, spreading of technologies in a fair, equitable way, multilaterally, so that it's not a company-to-company decision on whether to transfer or not. It needs to be a decision that's based on public health. And I think it's very important for the legal profession, really, to understand that public health is a public good, and it should, in emergencies like a pandemic, or I would argue that climate change-induced effects is also an emergency, and we need technologies that are being developed anywhere in the world, if they can help people to withstand the impacts of climate change or to mitigate, reduce the CO2 emission, or in some way improve the adaptation, then it needs to be shared equitably. And this is, I think, one of those areas where technology transfer and technology sharing should be made. And I think we really need to, I started thinking a lot about how R&D is shaped in countries, how it is funded. And for example, in the United States, $40 billion are spent annually. Just the National Institutes of Health alone, the NIH, has a budget of about $42 billion. And this goes into developing a lot of intellectual property, because this goes mainly into universities and academia, and they develop they do the initial research that leads to product development, whether it's a vaccine or a new drug or a gene therapy or a cancer treatment. But then this IP goes into the hands of the private sector and is then controlled by that. So public money, taxpayers' money, funding a technology which ultimately the government of the USA will have to pay for again. So basically the government pays twice for the same product, first to develop it and then to purchase it at whatever price the company wants to set. So I think we have to think about a new model for R&D if equity is of any concern for us, and if we don't want to leave lots of people behind. So the new model of R&D would essentially, if you're using public funds to fund research, then the benefits should also flow back to the taxpayers, who basically include all citizens in the country. So as I come to the end of my talk, I just wanted to also mention that the only legal framework we have today globally for health is the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. This took many, many years to negotiate at the World Health Assembly, but ultimately it was negotiated, and it has had an impact in terms of reducing tobacco use, across the world. Of course, the tobacco companies keep coming up with, ways of selling tobacco, especially to young people, in different ways. But there is a global treaty and a framework. We don't have a legal framework for any other health condition. Currently, the countries are negotiating a pandemic treaty or a pandemic accord, which will set some of the rules for how countries would need to, act if and when there is another pandemic. But that negotiation is going on, and we just need to, we don't know whether all of these equity provisions and access issues will be addressed through that treaty, because again, there are lots of vested interests as well that would try to water down, some of the provisions in that treaty. So let's hope that, the health leaders who are negotiating this will put in place something that's good for the future, so that we don't have a repeat of what happened during the COVID pandemic. So I think, I hope that I've made the link between climate change, which sometimes can sound, very, very esoteric. Like I said, we may think that there's some poor polar bear that's, going to suffer or be floating in the Arctic, but it's not. It's about the impact on human beings and on all other species, whether plants or animals. There's also a very clear link between mental health and climate change, as I've mentioned, particularly for people who live in cities And it's so nice to be again in Bangalore, which still has a lot of greenery as you drive around you. And even from this hotel, if you look around, you see a lot of greenery all around. This is very important, sir, for the mental health. So if you want happy citizens, we need to still make sure that we have these green open spaces. They are the lungs of the city. They'll also deal with pollution, encourage people to walk and cycle. Also, we need to really look at what we're eating, because more and more we're all eating very unhealthy. We're going away towards ultra-processed food. So involving communities, making sure that local produce is benefiting both the local farmer, but it's also the fresh and healthiest food that we can eat. All of this will have positive impacts on our, both on our physical and mental health. And I would like to thank again the organizers for having given me this opportunity today to be here with all of you and learn from you, and also to share some of my thoughts with you. Thank you very much. Namaste.
What a wonderful start to the conference that was. There were so many messages in that address that it would be inappropriate for me to now sort of try and summarise them. But in broad terms, Doctor, you provided us with some very sobering food for thought about the immediate impact of climate change on people's lives and livelihoods, and the key issues confronting us in the future, which include climate refugees, health, deforestation, economic ramifications, and generally the impact on young people and future generations. And that's, of course, in addition to your really interesting comments, your perspective on vaccine development, and specifically the democratisation of knowledge and the need for a new model for R&D. Some of these issues, the solution to some of these issues lie in the hands of scientists, but also, as you pointed out, a lot of the solutions lie in the hands of lawyers, and that leaves us all with something to think about. Would you join with me again in thanking our speaker? Now, we're all very privileged that our next speaker is the Chief Minister of Karnataka, Sri Siddaramaiah. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, sir. We all know how busy the Chief Minister must be, and we are really privileged that he found the time to address us this afternoon. Chief Minister.
Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, former Chief Scientist of WTO and Chairperson of MS Swaminathan Research Foundation. Ms. Melissa K. Pang, President of LawAsia. Mr. Prashant Kumar, the President of Bar Association of India. Sri S.S. Naganand, Vice President of Bar Association of India, Co-Chair 36th LawAsia Conference. Sri Shyam Diwan, Advocate Supreme Court of India and Co-Chair 36th LawAsia Conference. Dr. Gordon Hughes, AM, Secretary General, LawAsia. The distinguished dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good evening all. I'm immensely happy to be inaugurating the 36th LawAsia Annual Conference. Being a lawyer myself, I consider it a privilege to be a part of this conference. It seems like we have laws, rules and regulations to oversee just about everything. You don't always like these rules since they often mean that someone is telling us what to do or keeping us from doing what we want. Yet, to live in a civil society, you must have some rules to follow. Laws are rules that bind all people living in a community. Laws protect our general safety and ensure our rights as citizens against abuses by other people or by organizations and by the government itself. We have laws to help provide for our general safety. They exist at the local, state and national levels. In India, the Constitution is the ultimate source of the law. The Indian Constitution is unique in both spirit and content, notwithstanding the fact that several features of the Constitution have been borrowed from the constitutions from all around the world. It is really a unique piece of work. The original constitutions have been considerably changed by various amendments. The Indian Constitution is not a rigid constitution. It can be amended by the Parliament following a few rules. The Constitution states that India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and republican state. The objectives of the Constitution is justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. Our government is adhering to the Constitution in letter and spirit. Forces opposed to the Constitution of India are making attempts to return the country to the ancient era, and all citizens must be on their guard. But we are committed to, there are some anti-constitutional forces which oppose or deny the Constitution, but we are committed to protect our Constitution. Protection of the Constitution is the duty of every citizen. Especially the youth must understand the idea of the democracy and the Constitution, and thereby they know the main purpose of the preamble to lead a life with dignity, freedom and equality. For over 50 years, LawAsia has operated as a platform to promote the cross-jurisdictional exchange of legal knowledge as a voice of the legal profession. As legal professionals and representatives of the lawyer associations, you must use our unique understanding of the international legal system to fight against the human rights violations. Legal professionals can no longer sit idly while a civilian population in a jurisdiction is mercilessly subjected to such acts of crime and violence. I wish that we can join our hands to reduce the violations of law and contribute to a peaceful environment. I thank each one of you for providing an opportunity to be here with you all. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Your comments on the Indian Constitution are particularly pertinent in view of a very stimulating seminar we had yesterday organised by our Constitutional and Rule of Law Committee, where we discussed aspects of the constitutions of a number of different jurisdictions within the region. I think we better join with me again in thanking the Chief Minister for... Now, the next item on our agenda for this session is something foreshadowed by President Peng in her opening remarks, and that is the conferral of LawAsia Life memberships. The conferral of honorary life memberships is a very rare event for our organisation. You make someone an honorary life member, they don't pay membership fees anymore, apart from anything else. So we're very sparing. I think it's 15 years since we've done it. But every now and again, someone or some people come along whose contribution is just so outstanding and has been so important to sustaining our organisation that we feel we have to acknowledge it in a formal and tangible sort of a way. As Melissa mentioned in her opening remarks, we have resolved to award 2 honorary life memberships, one to Justice Brian Preston from Australia and one to Professor Yasushi Higashizawa from Japan. I'll deal with each of them in turn. Let me start with Justice Preston. Justice Preston is one of LawAsia's longest-serving committee chairs, and he's been an outstanding thought leader in the field of environmental law to the benefit of LawAsia and its members. He's been a member of the Environmental Law Committee for 36 years and has been chair of the Environmental Law since succeeding Anil Devan, which must have been 30 years ago. Throughout his period of service to LawAsia, he's remained a highly distinguished practitioner and judge. He was appointed as senior counsel in 1999 and was appointed Chief Judge of the Land and Environment Court of New South Wales in 2005. He's received too many awards for me to mention in this very brief summary, together with 2 honorary doctorates from Macquarie University and from Western Sydney University. And just earlier this year, he was awarded the Medal of Honour by the World Jurist Association. Justice Preston has not only delivered tireless service and leadership to LawAsia over a protracted period, but he's brought credit and credibility to LawAsia by his very involvement with us. What's meant to happen now is that I'm meant to invite Justice Preston and later on our other recipient up onto the stage to present him with a certificate, but I don't have it with me. I would love to, I do. I was going to say I'd love to blame the staff, but I thought I'd left them in my room. But anyway, somehow they've magically reappeared. So that's a relief. Could I ask Justice Preston to please come up?
You honour me in awarding me life membership of LawAsia. I've had the privilege of being a member since 1987. The first LawAsia conference I attended was in Malaysia in that year, where Mr. GTS Sindhu was elected president. I joined the Environmental Law Committee. Mr. Anil Devan was the chair. He later went on to be the president of LawAsia between 1991 and 1993. I succeeded him as the chair of the Environmental Law Committee in 1988, a position I've occupied since then. I continue to serve LawAsia because of what it stands for, what it does, and who it is. LawAsia stands for promoting the rule of law, respecting human rights, ensuring access to justice, and encouraging high ethical standards of legal practice. LawAsia does this through conferences, publications such as its newsletter and journal, The Asian Jurist, declarations and statements of principle, and observer and fact-finding missions. LawAsia is a family of legal peers and friends, a family led by persons of character and conviction. The presidents, committee chairs, and secretary generals are all loyal and dedicated servants of LawAsia and its mission. I have known them and looked up to them for over 3.5 decades. And on family, let me finish where I began. I started with LawAsia with a father, Anil Devan. Let me continue with his son, the President-elect, Shyam Devan. He continues a fine family tradition. Shyam, like his father, is a person with the highest integrity and morality, an outstanding lawyer, and a champion of human rights and ensuring access to justice for all. He is an exemplary role model for us all to follow. Anil Devan inspired me to start. Shyam Devan inspires me to continue to serve LawAsia and the environmental rule of law in the Asian Pacific region. Thank you.
All of us at LawAsia are very reassured to hear that Justice Preston intends to continue. Indeed, I bailed him up over breakfast this morning and asked him if he would convene a conference next year, and he had no hesitation in agreeing. So we're all very fortunate. The other recipient of an honorary life membership today is Professor Yasushi Higashizawa, as I mentioned before. Professor Higashizawa has worked tirelessly in the important role of co-chair of the LawAsia Human Rights Committee for many years. He relinquished the role only earlier this year. But even after relinquishing the role, he played a major part in convening the recent Human Rights Conference in Fukuoka, Japan. Throughout his period of service to LawAsia, Professor Higashizawa has maintained a distinguished academic career and legal practice. He's an attorney of law admitted in Japan and also in the states of New York and California in the United States. He's a partner at the Nishi Tokyo Kyoto Law Offices in Tokyo, and he's a professor at the Meiji Gakuin University Faculty of Law in Tokyo, where one of his roles is Director, Independence of the Profession. He's authored numerous books, including books in the areas, amongst others, of international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and international criminal law. LawAsia's principal objectives are to advocate for human rights and the rule of law. LawAsia has benefited greatly from having such a passionate, well-credentialed and highly respected lawyer as Professor Higashizawa to help shape our policy and direction in these areas. Unfortunately, Professor Higashizawa can't be here today, So I'm going to ask instead if Mr. Isomi Suzuki, a former LawAsia president from Japan, would come up and accept the award on his behalf.
This is just on behalf of Professor Higashizawa. I just read his message to you. It is my great honor to be granted this award. I apologize, however, my absence because of my unavoidable duties at my university. My consistent belief for being a member of the LawAsia is that we can always work together for human rights and rule of law, regardless of jurisdictions, legal cultures, or structure of governments. I've been convinced more on the belief through my experience as a co-chair of the Human Rights Committee of LawAsia. Now, being granted an opportunity to work for LawAsia for life, though I'm not sure how long it will be, is indeed a great encouragement to me. Thank you very much.
And with that, we draw to the end of this opening ceremony, which I think has been an exceptionally stimulating one, with some very high quality speakers, and it's been great to honour the two special honorary life members. I conclude now simply with... Do you want to speak? Yeah, okay. I'll just conclude with one housekeeping matter, and that is to remind you that you go from here at 6:30 to the evening program, which is dinner scheduled to start at 6:30, level 1, room A, B and C and terrace. If you don't know where that is, just follow the noise, I suggest. Naganand.
All good things have to come to an end, and we have come to the end of this function. And it's our pleasant duty now to request Shyam Diwan to please come up and present a bouquet to the Honorable Chief Minister. I now request Mr. Prashant Kumar to please hand over a memento to Honorable Chief Minister. President of the Bar Association of India, this is on behalf of the Bar Association of India. Thank you all once again, and thanks to the Honorable Chief Minister and Mrs. Soumya Swaminathan. We bring this session to an end and look forward to a nice, pleasant evening of good music and fun later in the evening. Thank you.